is just a crime of opportunity in terms of my mind is always searching for something interesting to do, and I had always wanted to be an actor, which obviously I have been doing now for almost 25 years. And you know, directing really interested me a long time ago, but it was at a time when you never saw female directors, and I just didn't really know how to make that leap, and it felt like something just like a bridge too far until I started to see women directors, and then that started to change my mind about that. And also I think a certain necessity. As I got older, you know, roles are just not as available, and as we embrace diversity, as we should, you know, that just cuts up the pie into more pieces, and so there were just fewer things available to me as I was aging, and also just the challenge, I think, of being able to use my brain in a different way to tell stories was really exciting to me. And so between all of those things, my book was something separate that just sort of came out of a moment of inspiration, and I was pitching a cookbook and happened to mention my children's book, and that's how that came to be. But in terms of filmmaking, it was just sort of something that I just started down that path, and I started hanging around with the camera department on the shows that I was shooting on, and particularly Magicians, which was really great about mentoring me through the process. And when I called and said, like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do to become a director? They said, make a film, and this is what I made. Okay, so what has my experience been switching sides from actress to director, sort of going from one side of the camera to the other? I love being an actor, and I don't really love the business of getting the work of being an actor, but I love being an actor, and I love telling stories. And then once I started to step onto the other side of the camera and realize that I could tell stories in a much more detailed fashion, much more in-depth. I could use my psychology degree to really think about the characters, and then use all the visual things that I so love about film and TV and meld all of that together as a director. That was really exciting to me, and I loved having my brain constantly working about how I could visually tell the stories that I wanted to tell. I remember in particular with this film, with the magical cabinet that you find, that this little girl finds in the forest, standing in front of it at night and sort of just contemplating it, like how I wanted it to look in the forest, and where was I going to put the little finials that I had found, the little bits that matched what she found in the house, for example. I just loved kind of envisioning that, and where I was going to put little pops of red that were kind of indicative of what was happening within the story, and you know, the filter that I was going to use for the old world. And I just really love being able to elevate my sense of creative storytelling, and being a director seemed like the most obvious place to do that. Why fantasy? That's a great question. You know, I feel like now that I'm looking back across my work across time, I see that everything I wrote has an element of magic in it. Even things that fall pretty much down the straight and narrow still tend to have magic in them. It's just clearly a thing that is ingrained in me, and there's you know, I found myself always writing things that had like magical doors. I didn't even realize I was doing that until I went to make this film and realized it was probably the third thing I had written like that. I think magic, obviously, from what I have done, has always been a part of my career, and it's just something that I've always been interested in. I love magical realism. For example, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I loved his work and how there is magic interwoven with very real characters. This film in and of itself was not what I had necessarily set out to make. When I originally started with this film, it was me imagining a film I could make without calling anybody in. I thought, I'm gonna make this film for $1,000 on my iPhone. What can I do? Well, I got a kid, I've got a park, here's my idea, great, we can do this, like, no problem. And then as soon as I made a couple of calls, because I've been working in the film industry for so long, all of a sudden I had a DP, and then I had a crew, and I had a location manager, and I had a crane, and it sort of blew up and became a bigger movie than I was expecting it to be. I think had I known I was going to have all those resources, this is not necessarily the film I would have made as my first film. But by the time that all started to happen, we were sort of so far down the road. And nonetheless, I'm delighted with how it turned out. I think it has whimsy, it has magic, it has just beautiful scenery. I think the house was magnificent. The girls were wonderful, and you know, it has a nice little twist. And so it was great. It was fun to make, and now I'm working on something much more narrative. And I expect that there'll be a lot more sort of there'll be lots more magic in the films that I make. I think when I make my own films, I think they will always have magic in them because it just seems to be what I'm interested in. What now? Isn't that the question? I have been working on a short film at home on my own during quarantine about quarantine. It's the story of a young girl who ends up all by herself during quarantine. And I've just been slowly picking away at that, kind of working my filmmaker brain, even though I haven't necessarily been out there in the world working. And that's been an exciting and interesting project to do under the limitations of COVID. And I am in talks right now to direct a film that we'll be shooting in October, and hopefully I will be the girl directing it. And everything else, we just wait. You know, there's always stuff up in the air, and there's always a hustle in this business. And it didn't change going from actor to director, so it's just more hustle. I have a pilot that I wrote, a whole world I've created there that is making its way out into the world and just sort of slowly making its way up the chain, and you know, you never know what could happen with that. All right, so stay tuned. And now, what is my perspective on the future with respect to COVID? Oh, that's a hard one. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine who was the props master on Magicians, and he's been so great with me. When I call him up, I'm like, can I get a hold of one of these things, or does this even exist? And sure enough, it did, and he was kind enough to lend it to me, and we were chatting about what it looks like on set right now, because he had gone back to a show, which I haven't been back on set yet, and just the ways in which, you know, our departments can't mix, and you know, we don't have the same kind of prep meetings as we would have had, for example, when I was shadowing on Magicians, and everybody's together, and the producers and the director and the DP, and we can, you know, do what they call show and tell with the props department, where they get to lay out all the treasures, and you as a director get to go and pick them. That all of that is scuttled, and I suspect for the next long while that will be true, unfortunately. And you know, I lament that. I think one of the things I love most about being in film is the sense of family that's created on a set, and the I'm a chitter chatter girl. I like to go and chat with everybody, and it was part of what led me to directing, is that instead of sort of sitting with all the actors in our cast chairs and everybody's looking at their phones or something, I was over at the camera truck asking what lens they were using, and you know, how does a Ronin work, and what did they do for that, or standing with the crane guys and watching how the crane was moving, and then going over to the VFX monitors and seeing how that was all coming together and trying to learn. And I'm not going to be able to do that now, and none of us will for some time. What I do think it will bring is, when we are through this, we will all have a new appreciation of everything that we do, whether in film or anywhere else. And I know I certainly will feel like it's a wondrous thing to stand in a catering line again with all of my colleagues, and to go to a proper prep meeting where everybody's there and we can look each other in the face without masks on and everything else. I think it will change the stories that we tell. I don't know which way. I don't know if it will go dark and dystopian, or if we're going to want to talk about hope and what brings us together, because we see clearly right now what tears us apart. So maybe that will be the focus in the future, and I certainly hope so. I tend to write dark things, and I'm trying to teach myself right now to think differently, and to think like, you know, I want to make like a P.T. Anderson kind of film that's quirky and bright and hopeful, and I mean, not all of his are like that, but you know, just something with a different feel from the dark things I tend to write. So here's to a future filled with hope for all of us, and thank you so much for having me and our film in this wonderful festival, and I hope to come in the future with yet another film, and maybe come in person next time. All right, take care of yourselves, stay safe, be kind to each other, and have a great festival. Bye.
Wonderful, magic, I think. And the whole film was so wonderful, and it's a girl's film. I think she's still very young, and with two girls, and I think it's one of the most one of the sweetest film I've seen recently. And but I think it's like in Germany. In Germany, in the cinema halls, they have separate films for men and women. And I think this one will function much better with women than with men, as long as we were 5 men and 1 girl, 1 woman, myself, in the jury. and they weren't convinced by this film, and I suffered horribly because of that. But I must admit that still re-seeing it several times, I'm still thinking it was the very best, because it has everything, because it has also magic, it was sci-fi, it was young and restless, it was a crown, it was fairy tale, because I think the most important for a film is to make you feel like in a fairy tale, in a nice one, because the nightmare, we have it outside, and I think it's enough not to have it also on the big screen or on a small screen or in a drive-in. So that would be one of my questions. Would be, how old were the girl? I suppose for about 10 or 8 to 10, and how difficult it was for them to understand a little bit of this magic and of this word so sweet in both sides. Any questions?
I want to say a few words about your take on that this film is mostly for girls and women, and I must say that then I am a girl, because I liked it very much. It was, first of all, a little jewelry of a short film. When you see it multiple times and you take the time to see all the details, the technical details about the camera, the lighting, the playing of the actors, you will see that is a very well and balanced film. And the story also is soft and continuous, like a thread. And the final twist is very, very interesting and disturbing.
Extremely interesting.
And disturbing.
It is psychoanalytic, to tell you the truth. Yes.
Yes, and disturbing in this way. And I think I agree totally with you that it is a very good film, and was it's such a shame he was underrated by the other members of the jury.
Yeah, but it got a diploma, and it got our heart. It's like for Princess Diana. It's the most important thing.
Yes.
The heart of everybody. And by the way, in order to have something for this film, you see, we have something sweet, like in the film. You see, if taken out from the film. That's the idea. Yes, it was Simona's idea to take out from the film. She was inspired. No crown, but I think she should be crowned for this one too, and for this whole festival. Yeah. Questions? Any questions or discussions about this film, of this fantastic word from both point of view? I mean, fantastic, this was wonderful, and fantastic, it was a surreal word. It was like in a nice dream, as I was saying, not in a nightmare. The costumes were very well done also. And I think it's so nice that the whole thing came from a hat, and also the film director, she has a wonderful hat on her head. And I suppose after finishing this recording, she entered that word immediately in there to have her piece of cake. Which wasn't a piece of cake, by the way, to make such a complex film. Believe me, it's not easy at all.
Hi. I would just like to make a short comment on the movie, which I think is quite exceptional on certain levels. One, even though being so short, it tells so much, and it has so many details which can be interpreted and dissected. And it's a lovely thing to see that in 6 minutes, something, a work of art, because this is a work of art, can say and express and transmit so much information, which is lovely. That's artistry, when you can say, because short movies, short films usually as short literature, as everything which is short in expression, has sometimes trouble in expressing all that it wants to, just because it has this time limitation, or page limitation or whatever. But here, by not saying very much, by hiding certain things, by letting them being discovered by the people who are watching them, compensates, because I guess she knows that in 6 minutes you can't say all that you want to say. So then you just have to interact with the public and hope that the public will catch on to all the little things that you put in there. And the other thing I wanted to say is that it sort of reminds me visually and as a rhythm with this sort of new fantasy genre in movies, which, for instance, Narnia, because it has the imagery, the coloring, the nuances, the attitude of that sort of, it starts as a quirky child play like fantasy, but it invites to so much more. Or his Dark Materials, which is, again, it starts in a wonderful fantasy world filled with children, but then you find out that there's more to that. And also it's somehow transported me, took me to that attitude of fairy tales and the sort of themes and motifs of fairy tales, where you have there's that, you have the castle, you have the mansion, you have the otherworldly place, which is somebody is trapped there. And I think you can find this in Romanian fairy tales too, as well. You have the innocent one, which is protected by the I don't know, let's call him the dragon in English. I think it's Zmeu, the father, which is a Kapkaun. He's the monster.
A
He's
dragon, yeah.
Yes. So it goes, in several places, and I think that is wonderful, because everyone can make his own connection to what he already knows from these fairy tales, these childhood stories, which are sort of similar all around the world, and share motifs, and share and ultimately share the feeling of wonder, which I think this movie catches and gives back to the audience. The fact that childhood and us being children is a sense of wonderment in discovering the world, which we interpret and filter through our own experiences, which is not that complex, but it's taken from the stories which we are told and we enjoy. And this is a gift that I think the director gives back to its audience. This is what it means to be a child. But also filtered through her experience as an adult, as a grown woman, as a person which is already has a complex intellect and knowledge, and so it goes beyond that. So thank you for this movie. It was excellent.
Yeah, really, thank you. It's a gift. It's a gift that, by the way, with this magician hat, and on the other hand, she offered us also the key to a word entering a music box. So that was also extremely suggestive for what is going to happen in there, because it's another word. And I suppose my colleague from the jury, they didn't discover the key. Yes, I'm joking. Yes, I know, I'm very mean. Yeah. Okay.
Also, I discovered that the director Keegan Tracy is she's actually quite known actress, and I remembered seeing her. And I'm sorry she's not here, because I would have embarrassed her greatly. The first thing I remembered was her death scene in Final Destination 2. Which is, I don't know if anybody remembers it. She played there, and she has one of the most goriest death scenes in that movie. Her head gets impaled by a spike. So, you know, going from that scenery, that image to this wonderful movie is
It's a total contrast.
yes,
Yes,
it's
yes.
a total contrast. But yes, she's quite a known actress, and I just discovered that.
It was a contre-emploi from her point of view, her real life point of view, I think. Yeah, that's true. But it was again more or less sci-fi films. So the final destination anyhow was a Green film, but not of Brother Grimm. Yes. Okay. Any more comments or something for this wonderful film?
Moderator, you're breaking up.
Anyhow, I'm still thinking that it was the jewel of the crown, you know, like India was called for the crown of Great Britain. I think this film was the jewel of this special department of films. And even if they prefer Mermaid, I think the young girls and the wonderful, wonderful word are sometimes better. Anything else to say? Have you noticed the ball at the beginning? It was, I don't know if it has something to do with the Wizard of Oz, because we have a rainbow on that ball, and that was also a very nice detail, I would say, for this film. It was the very beginning, entering in another world, and especially now after so many years from almost more than 80 years from the Wizard of Oz film this time, not the book. I think it has a way of smiling to that story a little bit, with a very pleasant and warm smile for that story. Don't you think so?
I think yes, that was she made a reference to that as being, you know, the Wizard of Oz being maybe the quintessential movie and story, even though it is after the movie is after the book Narnia. I think Narnia is before Frank Baum's book, but it's one of the most famous, if not the most famous movie and book about this sort of translation into another world. And yes, maybe it is a tribute. It is a sort of you know, remembering that it's that medium which made us think and desire and acknowledge the possibility that we might travel, we could travel, we can travel
with our imagination.
With our imagination, yes.
We need it now, I suppose. No more passport needed for the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else from the others? Maybe it's as well possible not to like it. Maybe I'll have some argument against this film. I won't find any, that's for sure.
It's too short.
Too short, yes.
Yes, it should be a full-length movie.
But maybe if we encourage her, and if she gets enough prizes, or at least the admiration of the audience, because I think the audience is always more important than any juror in the world, any what is called a professional in the world, because films are made for cinema goers and cinema lovers. Maybe she'll get the idea to have a long feature starting from that. We have this very well system, well known in Romania, and functioning exceptionally good. We know that. So maybe we should write her a love letter saying, we'd love to have a longer one. So we are two of us writing. Maybe also Darius could sign this letter and we put it on the internet and maybe it will work. And then we'll go for the premiere, which will be with real people in a real life in here, in the drive-in in here. What do you think about?
Yes, it's a nice idea, taking into consideration that she expressed her will to come here in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
Romania is a very nice country, and we are very welcoming as a people. And
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe in the future we can do that. I also liked her very much, her personality. She was open and candid, and these are very important characteristics when it comes to communication and making connection between people. So I think that probably if we will invite her into the festival, the next or the following edition, maybe she will accept. We will see.
It's like I like to say, she's as beautiful inside as outside, which is quite rare. Usually it's always beautiful outside, only beautiful outside and not inside, or vice versa. In her case, they are both of them.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, I think in a pragmatic level, she should be encouraged to do this, because as far as I've seen it, and Mrs. Nistor can confirm if I'm not wrong, the fantasy genre in movies, in cinematography is quite underplayed. So there's a lot of science fiction, and science fiction usually movies become blockbusters, and you know there's quite a huge hype around them. But fantasy has been underplayed. So I think probably the peak of fantasy movies in the last 20 years is Lord of the Rings, no question about that. But the producers seem a bit, how should I say, timid when it comes to financing fantasies. And I'm not sure why that is, because it's a wonderful genre. It's probably the curse of the Lord of the Rings, because they made that movie and everybody tried to copy it afterwards. But there should be new material, there should be new stories, there should be something additionally made, which is not part of a franchise, maybe, which is not part of something which is already famous. Let's give, independent movie makers, let's give independent screenwriters, let's give beginners the chance to tell their wonderful stories. And their wonderful stories should have the possibility of and the chance to be viewed by great deals of people in large cinemas, and they should become mainstream as new media, as something which is, because there's this every 10 or 15 years the paradigm changes, and then we start making new movies, new ideas, and I think her and movie makers like her should get this chance of telling something new. So yes, I'm all about.
She made us dreaming. Yes. See, that's the idea. Yes, and she inspired us for a very nice afternoon, even if it's raining outside. So all of a sudden, we left our world and we entered another one, and that is quite rare to make us forget and ignore everything around us. And I think this is the main job of passionate film director. Passionate with love for her or his audience, also not for him or herself. That's very important. Yeah. So I think we are approaching the end of our session, and let's hope for more films as sweet as this one.